Just a small town girl living in a lonely world. What? She took the midnight train going anywhere.
Simon Cowell has spent many years working on televised talent competitions, where he has judged a wide range of performers. One of these performers, Richard Goodall, gained attention through a public audition and later appearances. This timeline looks at how Richard Goodall entered the public space, how his performances were received, and how events during a live broadcast involving Simon Cowell
Took the midnight train going anywhere.
became part of the broader discussion. The focus will remain on the sequence of appearances, public reactions, and the context surrounding these moments, using available information to outline how the situation developed over time. Simon Cowell became a central figure in television long before this moment took place.
To now, your interaction with the audience, the confidence. I think this has been my favorite performance of you so far.
His career began in the music industry, where he worked behind the scenes in artist development and production. By the early 2000s, he had moved into television, becoming widely known as a judge on talent competitions. His role was simple in structure, but powerful in influence. He listened, evaluated, and made decisions that could shape a performer's future. Over time, his style became consistent. He spoke directly, often focusing only on what he heard and saw. He did not spend much time on emotion. Instead, he talked about pitch, control, and whether a performance would connect with a wide audience. This approach made him stand out from other judges. It also created a clear public image. By the time he joined major shows, his reputation was already established. Viewers expected a certain kind of response from him. They expected calm, controlled feedback. They expected clear opinions. What they did not expect was visible emotional reaction. That was rarely part of his on-screen behavior. There were moments over the years when he showed small changes in tone. In a few cases, he gave longer comments than usual. In others, he paused before speaking. These small details were noticed by regular viewers. They suggested that even within a structured role, there were subtle shifts happening over time. Another lesser-known detail is that Simon Cowell has often spoken about separating personal feelings from professional judgment. This approach shaped how he appeared on camera. It also meant that when something did affect him personally, it was not always visible to the audience. Because of this long history, his reactions carried weight. Even a small change could be noticed. A pause, a look, or a shift in voice could lead to discussion. And when something larger happened, it would not go unnoticed. At this stage, nothing unusual had taken place. His role remained steady. His behavior remained consistent. But this consistency would later become the reason one moment stood out so clearly. And at the time, no one expected that a future live broadcast would challenge that image in a very visible way. Richard Goodall entered public attention through a path that was not widely known before his television appearance. Unlike many performers, he did not come from a highly public background. His early life and work were mostly outside mainstream media coverage. This made his introduction to a large audience more noticeable. When he appeared on stage for the first time, the format followed a familiar structure. He introduced himself briefly, shared a small part of his background, and then prepared to perform. This structure is used to help viewers connect a person's story to their performance. In many cases, it also shapes how the performance is received. His song choice was important. It reflected his vocal range and style. It also gave the judges a clear way to evaluate his ability. Performers often choose songs that highlight their strengths, but they also take a risk by selecting well-known material. This balance is not always easy to manage. One detail that stood out early was his stage presence. It was not overly polished, but it was steady. This kind of presence can sometimes connect with audiences in a different way. It creates a sense of authenticity, even if the performance is still developing. After the audition aired, clips began to appear online. This is a common pattern for talent shows. Short segments are shared, and viewers react quickly. In Richard Goodall's case, the response grew steadily rather than instantly. This slower growth often leads to longer attention over time. Another lesser-known aspect is how production teams track audience response after an audition. Metrics such as view counts, shares, and comments are reviewed. These numbers can influence how a contestant is presented in later episodes. While this process is not always visible, it plays a role behind the scenes. At this stage, Richard Goodall was becoming known mainly through his voice and his first appearance. There were no major turning points yet. His position in the competition was still being formed. But as he continued forward, his performances would bring him into closer interaction with the judges. And that is where the timeline begins to shift in a more noticeable way. After his first appearance, Richard Goodall moved into the next stages of the competition. Each round required a new performance. These performances were not only about singing well, they were also about showing growth. Judges often look for improvement, consistency, and the ability to handle pressure. In the early rounds, his performances followed a steady pattern. He chose songs that matched his vocal ability. He maintained control and avoided major errors. This kind of consistency is often valued in competitions, even if it does not always create strong reactions. Simon Cowell's responses during these performances remained aligned with his usual style. He focused on technical points. He spoke about whether the performance would work for a wider audience. His tone stayed measured and direct. However, there were small details that began to appear. In one instance, he paused slightly longer before giving feedback. In another, he acknowledged effort in a way that went beyond simple critique. These moments were brief, but they suggested a shift that was not immediately explained. Another important factor during this stage was comparison. Each contestant was placed alongside others in the same round. This created a clear ranking, even if it was not always stated directly. Richard Goodall's performances were evaluated within this group context. Audience reaction also played a role. Applause levels, online comments, and viewing numbers all contributed to how a contestant was perceived. In some cases, audience response can influence how judges frame their feedback in later rounds. A lesser-known detail is that judges often review performances again after filming. This allows them to reflect on what they saw in real time. It can also influence how they respond in future episodes. This behind-the-scenes process is rarely discussed, but is part of the overall system. At this point, nothing had clearly broken the pattern. The competition was moving forward in a structured way. Judges were responding as expected. Contestants were performing under the same conditions. But there was a growing sense that something different might happen. The small changes in behavior were not fully understood yet, and the pressure of live performance was still ahead. Because once the competition moved into a live format, the conditions would change completely. And in that setting, even small shifts can become very visible. What happened next would take place in real time, without any chance to adjust or edit the moment. The transition to live broadcast marked a clear change in the competition. Unlike recorded segments, live shows happen in real time. There is no delay, no editing, and no second take. Every reaction is seen exactly as it happens. During one of these live broadcasts, Richard Goodall delivered his performance as scheduled. The structure of the show remained the same. He walked on stage, performed his song, and waited for feedback. But the environment was different. The audience was watching at that exact moment, and the judges were responding without preparation. As the performance ended, attention shifted to the judges' panel. This is a standard part of the format. Each judge gives their thoughts, often in a set order. Simon Cowell, known for his steady approach, began to respond. But this time, something changed. His reaction did not follow the usual pattern. There was a visible pause. His expression shifted. For a brief moment, he did not speak. This kind of pause is rare in live television, especially from someone with years of experience. Then came a response that included visible emotion. This was not typical for him. Viewers who had watched him for years noticed the difference immediately. The reaction was not exaggerated, but it was clear enough to stand out. Because the show was live, this moment was broadcast without any alteration. There was no chance to adjust how it appeared. This made the moment more impactful. It also meant that viewers across different regions saw the same reaction at the same time. A lesser-known detail is that production teams often prepare for unexpected moments during live shows. However, emotional reactions from judges are harder to predict. They are not scripted, and they do not follow a set pattern. At this stage, the focus was not on explaining the reaction. It was on observing that it happened. The context remained tied to the performance, but the meaning was not yet clear. And as the broadcast ended, the moment did not fade. Instead, it began to spread beyond the show itself, because what had just happened was now being replayed, shared, and discussed in ways that would extend far beyond that single broadcast. After the live broadcast, the moment involving Simon Cowell began to circulate quickly. Clips were uploaded to online platforms within a short time. These clips focused on the reaction rather than the full performance. This is a common pattern when a specific moment stands out. Viewers began to share the video across social media. Comments appeared under each post, often noting how unusual the reaction seemed. Many compared it to his past behavior. This comparison became a central part of the discussion. Media outlets also began to report on the event. Their coverage followed a similar structure. They described what happened during the broadcast and placed it within the context of his career. Some included short timelines, showing how rarely such reactions had been seen before. A lesser-known aspect is how quickly digital platforms amplify certain moments. Algorithms often promote content that receives rapid engagement. In this case, the clip met that condition. As a result, it reached a wider audience beyond regular viewers of the show. Audience interpretation varied. Some focused on the performance itself. Others focused on the judge's reaction. This split created different discussions around the same moment. It also kept the topic active for a longer period. Behind the scenes, production teams monitored this response. Viewer engagement can influence how future episodes are edited and presented. While the competition format remained unchanged, the attention around this moment became part of its ongoing narrative. At this point, the event had moved beyond the original broadcast. It had become part of a larger conversation. But the competition itself was still continuing. And while the public focused on the reaction, Richard Goodall still had to move forward to the next stage. Because the story was not ending here. In many ways, it was only entering a new phase. Following the widely discussed moment, Richard Goodall returned to the competition format. The structure remained unchanged. Each round required preparation, performance, and evaluation. Despite the increased attention, the process itself stayed consistent. His next performances were closely watched. Viewers who had seen the previous broadcast were now paying more attention. This shift in attention can change how a contestant is perceived, even if their performance style remains the same. Simon Cowell also returned to his judging role. His feedback continued to follow the same structure as before. He spoke about performance quality and audience connection. The earlier reaction was not directly referenced during these moments. A lesser-known detail is that contestants often receive guidance between rounds. This guidance can come from vocal coaches or production teams. It helps them adjust song choices and stage presentation. While this process is not always shown, it plays a key role in performance development. Audience voting or judge decisions continue to shape the competition. These systems are designed to maintain fairness and consistency. Even when external attention increases, the internal structure remains in place. At this stage, the earlier moment was still part of public discussion, but it did not define the entire competition. Richard Goodall's progress depended on each new performance. However, the increased visibility meant that each appearance carried more weight. Expectations were higher, reactions were stronger, and the connection between performance and response became more noticeable. Because when a single moment changes how people watch, it also changes what they look for next. And as the competition moved closer to its final stages, the impact of that earlier event continued to shape how everything was seen. Televised talent competitions have produced many memorable moments over the years. These moments often occur during live broadcasts, where reactions are immediate and unfiltered. Judges, contestants, and audiences all contribute to how these moments are formed. Simon Cowell's reaction during the broadcast with Richard Goodall can be viewed within this larger pattern. While it stood out due to his usual style, it was not the first time a live show created an unexpected moment. Historically, live television has always carried this possibility. Without editing, every detail becomes part of the final broadcast. This includes pauses, expressions, and changes in tone. These small elements can sometimes become more significant than the performance itself. A lesser-known detail is that producers often review these moments to understand audience behavior. They analyze what led to increased engagement and how similar responses might occur in the future. This process helps shape how shows evolve over time. In this case, the moment became part of a broader timeline. It was discussed alongside other events from different seasons and shows. This comparison placed it within a larger context, rather than treating it as a single isolated event. For viewers, the moment added another layer to how they understood the show. It showed that even in a structured format, unexpected reactions can still happen. It also showed that long-established patterns can shift, even if only briefly. And as the timeline comes to a close, the focus returns to the sequence of events rather than individual reactions. Because in the end, what remains is not just one moment, but how that moment fits into a larger system that continues to operate in the same way. Stories like this are rarely presented step by step, with focus on what actually happened over time. Subscribing helps keep these detailed timelines available for those who want to understand them clearly. And in the structure of live television, even the smallest change in reaction can leave a lasting mark that continues long after the broadcast ends.